Hello and welcome to Beyond the Mirror podcast, where we're discussing things about success, beauty, and positive aging, as well as receiving an expert advice. Today, I have a wonderful guest, Dr. Ahmad Musa, who is a neurosurgeon, but now fully specializing in hair transplant surgery. So, hello, Ahmad.
Hi, Ola. Thank you for asking me to come on. I'm very grateful.
It's absolute pleasure to have you, and I think your expertise and your advice would be absolutely invaluable to those who are listening.
Thank you.
Ahmad, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? How did it all started? Let's go back to medical school.
So medical school, it's a long time ago. I qualified in 2002, did a bit of general stuff, and then started to specialize in neurosurgery. So I did that full time for about 17 years as a full-time career. During that, I did my master's degree, I did my membership of the Royal College of Surgeons, I did my MD degree, and I became a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons. So it was a good career. It was a good time. I saw lots of things, did a lot of things, and time came for a change.
How long does it actually take to be a fully qualified neurosurgeon?
You've got 6 years of medicine, you've got a couple of years of foundation, and then you have approximately 8 years of training to become a consultant neurosurgeon. These days, you usually do a fellowship or two, so it ends up being a little bit longer than that.
And tell us, how did you make this transition into hair transplant world? So, and would encourage you to do this stuff?
It's a good story. I never planned it. I got asked to do it, and I initially declined, and then I got asked again, and I declined again. And then third time, when they came and asked me whether I'd be interested in doing it, and I said no for the third time, they said, well, why not? And I said, well, I don't really know whether I want to spend my career dealing with a bunch of vain people. And the guy said, he said, okay. He said, why don't you come down for a couple of days and meet the vain people? So I said, okay. So I went down and stayed a few days with them. And I remember one of the first patients I saw, they were getting him ready for the transplant. And before they started, he asked to pop to the toilet. And just to step outside of the room, across the corridor into the toilet, he had to put a hat on his head. He couldn't face the outside world with a balding head exposed. And that surprised me a little bit, but I thought, okay. And then another patient came, and he'd actually had a transplant about a year and a half before that. And they said, why don't you have a chat with him? So I sat talking to him. And he was a very successful businessman. He'd achieved a lot in his life. But he'd found that before the transplant, he was avoiding going in any photos. So family photos, holidays, birthdays, he subconsciously just avoided being in front of the camera. But the tipping point for him, as part of his job, he had to talk in public. And he found that when he came to talk in public, he was focusing more on his hair loss and what people were thinking about it rather than the speech he was supposed to be giving. And that was the point where he decided to do something about it. And then a year and a half later, with his results there, everything had changed. He was back in photos, back talking in public. And to quote him, he'd got his life back. And that's when it started to finally dawn on me that it wasn't about vanity at all. There was a much bigger confidence, self-esteem, just a huge mental health side to it. And seeing that difference that we could make for somebody, that sold it for me. That was it. I went into it there and then.
So that is very interesting how the whole perspective have changed when you didn't work in industry so that people go there for vanity.
Yeah.
But when you saw it from inside, you realize that there is much deeper concept to
Oh,
all of that?
absolutely. I was slightly ashamed of myself because I'd completely missed it. I'd completely and totally missed what it was all about. And there is practically no vanity in it at all. There's, people come very affected by hair loss, and hair is unique. It's something that patients had, they lost it, and they just want it back again. So it's part of who they are. It's part of their identity, and losing it, unless you're in that situation or you've spoken to someone who's really opened up about it, and men are very bad at opening up about things. So unless someone's really opened up about it, it's difficult to understand, difficult to know where they're coming from. But it does have a huge, huge, huge impact.
I think I completely can relate and understand that the concept and the change that happens through hair transplant goes far beyond just patient appearance. It impacts their life, it impacts their confidence. But surely you have had probably cases where people only wanted to do it for vanity. How do you approach those?
I think even I've only had one patient that's ever told me he's doing it for vanity reasons. Only one, and even him, when patients sit down in the chair and starts having it done, it's a long process. So we get to talking, and it becomes a bit of a therapy session sometimes. And even he, as he was going through the day, it started to come out that it was having a big impact on him from a mental health point of view. The vanity side is very, very little.
I would imagine that hair transplant procedures dominating among men. Is it correct?
So men definitely suffer with it more. Male pattern baldness is a much bigger thing, but there are also quite a lot of ladies that have problems. A smaller percentage of ladies do go through female pattern hair loss. We also have a lot of ladies that have suffered with traction alopecia. So years of combing their hair very tight or holding it in very tight buns weakens that front strip, and they start to lose it. So we have some patients some ladies in quite a lot of trouble. They'll often wear wigs, so no one realizes what's going on, but they take that wig off, and they are sometimes worse off than men. But you're right, it is a smaller percentage compared to men.
And Ahmad, can you please tell us what is required if you want to offer a high quality hair transplant service? What training did you do? What experience do you need to gain before you're out there and see and help patients?
I think it's important that you have a medical background of some sort. I think
Sorry to step up here, but can non-medics do this as well?
I wouldn't advise it, no. You are dealing with a human being. You are penetrating the skin. If they have other medical issues, you need to take that into account, or you could end up in a lot of problems. If they have issues of blood pressure, for example, they will bleed. They can ruin the transplant. If they're on blood thinners, that needs to be managed beforehand. There's risks of hair transplants are very rare, but they exist, and you need to be able to deal with that. And if you don't have a medical background, you just won't be able to do it.
As far as I know, that with hair transplant, you also require a sufficient amount of local anesthetic,
Yes.
and not having the right medical knowledge, I would imagine, can put patient in quite serious danger with that as well.
Yes, if you don't anesthetize well enough, the patients will be in a lot of pain. Their blood pressure goes up. The grafts will be damaged. If they have too much anesthetic, they can go into toxicity, and that can be potentially very, very dangerous.
But to your knowledge, do you know if people who have no medical background in the UK potentially can offer these treatments? Because I think that will be very scary for
Yeah,
the public.
no. The UK is regulated, so yes, there has to be a doctor there. Hair transplants, it's quite a lot of work involved. So there'll always be a surgeon, and there'll be a team of technicians with him, depending on the size of the case. Between 2 and 4 technicians is the average, but there should always be a doctor there.
I think that is reassuring. Let's go back to the training. So what training do you need to do in order to offer this procedure? safely?
It's a good question, a difficult one to answer. There's no formal specialty within medicine that will lead you into hair transplants. Doctors in that industry tend to come from all sorts of varying backgrounds. It's useful if you have a surgical background. Penetrating the skin, you're dealing with bleeding. One of the methods of taking grafts out of the back, you take a strip out of the scalp and you've got to suture it up and close it up. So having a surgical background is definitely very useful. But there are a lot of doctors doing it that don't have surgical backgrounds very successfully. My route was, it was a little bit of a shortcut. You need a lot of fine hand movement, and because of my neurosurgical background, I already had that. So for me, the hardest part was just learning how to draw a hairline. But that comes with, you work with people that are doing it. You see what they do. There's a lot of information out there on how to build it up. But sadly, there isn't a dedicated curriculum or course for it at the moment.
Do you see that it may change in the future?
I think as time goes by, more regulations will start to hit it, and I think there will, over time, there will be some formal path to become fully trained. In America, they're starting it at the moment. There is a way of going through that, but again, it's not obligatory. The UK and EU don't have a formal training path for it at the moment.
So considering that there is no formal pass, no specialist registrar, what would be your advice to the patient who considering hair transplant and they're looking on the internet and trying to find a provider or surgeon, what they should look for?
I think they need to see what the background of the surgeon doing it is. As I say, as a procedure, although it's not difficult, there are some tricks to it, but you are dealing with the patient, so they need to have, some sort of a medical background. So seeing what their medical background is, seeing how much experience they have, and always talk to the surgeon that's going to be doing it. You may start off with a salesperson to filter out people that are completely, not suitable for a hair transplant. But before going ahead, I think you should always talk to the surgeon that's actually going to perform the procedure. And, feel free to ask them questions, ask them, what their experience is, ask them what their background is, ask them what their complication rate is. Every doctor will have, some complication rate. It should be very small, but it will be there. If anyone says they've never ever had a complication or an unhappy patient, then they've either not been doing it very long or they're not being very honest.
Well, that is true. If you haven't had a complication, you haven't done enough.
Exactly.
So, Ahmad, you're now working full-time in hair transplant industry. But if we go back in time and this moment when you needed to leave your employment, secure a position in NHS, your pension, all the benefits, how did it feel? Was it scary? How did you took this step?
It was a big leap of faith. I'd never fully planned it. I thought it would be nice to have both, do neurosurgery and do hair transplants at the same time. It's a very difficult thing to do. They both consume a considerable amount of time, and it's important to have a little bit of a work-life balance. It can't all be work, work, work. I left, it was during the second lockdown. So we'd been through the first lockdown. We'd done all sorts of crazy stuff to get through the COVID effort in the hospital. And a second lockdown was coming. Our elective operating had still ground to a halt in neurosurgery. The hair industry was carrying on. But the tipping point for me was more personal reasons. I had family that required care at that point, and I just needed to be able to dedicate a bit more time to them. I thought I would probably go back at some point, but I just enjoyed doing hair so much. I never went back. I'd done a lot in the NHS. I'd done a lot in neurosurgery. I'd been a consultant for several years. I'd had various trainees under me, so I'd given back quite a bit as much as I'd taken. So I felt it was the right time to move on. Yes, you do lose that safety net. That's the NHS pension is a very good pension. The guaranteed paycheck at the end of the month is very good, but sometimes in life you need to take a risk and keep the faith.
Absolutely. I think you're not getting anywhere in life without taking a risk. I completely share with you that approach. But talking about work-life balance, have you achieved this now? Did hair transplant industry give you this wonderful opportunity to have it right?
I'm certainly more in control, so I can choose to work as much or as little as I want to. It's rewarding in that you work hard, you gain the rewards of working hard. If you want to take time off, you've got that option. So it certainly helped me with that side of things. Yes.
And talking about your family, were your friends and family supportive in your decision leaving NHS, or did they doubt you?
Everyone was very supportive. It was always a bit of a shame walking away from neurosurgery. But I've not completely walked away from it. I actually graduated in Egypt, and my first few years of working in neurosurgery was at a university there. So I'm still attached to them. So I've not completely left it, but I don't do it full time anymore. So I've still got my hand in a little bit.
But everyone have had a trust in you.
Yes, and everyone was very, very supportive. I've been very fortunate. My family were behind me all the way. I couldn't have done this without them.
Wonderful. Hair transplant seems to be very thriving and growing industry. A couple of years ago, you probably would quite rarely hear about that people have had hair transplant, and now people talk more openly about it. What is your opinion? Does this industry still has potential to grow?
Yes. I think over the last few years, mental health has been a very important part of life. People are much more open about talking about difficulties with it. People are much more receptive to dealing with and helping other people through mental health problems. And I think as there's been a bigger push for that, people have become a lot more open about things like being bothered with hair loss. We have many patients that when they actually tell friends or colleagues they're thinking about it, instead of being ridiculed, they're actually finding that they are supportive, and they'll find within their circle there's someone that's possibly had it done, or several that are thinking about having it done and not quite sure how to go about it. So as an industry, it's definitely boomed. It's got bigger and bigger. We've got better at doing it. So the results are looking more and more promising. So I think it's an industry that will only get bigger and better with time.
And what would be your recommendation for those practitioners who just starting in hair transplant? How they can increase their patient numbers, how they can promote themselves for patient to find out more about them or choose them as their providers?
It's a difficult question to answer. It usually helps if you have a team around you. You need a team of, to help advertise, whether it be on social media or on the internet. Trying to do everything on your own is very difficult. As a doctor, you want your focus to be on the patient and treating the patient, not worrying about, how many, calls there've been or how many reviews there are. It's usually better to have someone to help them with that side of things.
I know that you have a fantastic team behind you, which allows you to focusing on what you do the best, and that is looking after your patients. And what is your opinion about health tourism? I think hair transplant specifically attracts a lot of people to go abroad. We hear about people traveling to Turkey. So how safe or risky this is?
It's another challenging question. You're right. A lot of people are traveling a lot more, shopping around. The internet has made the world a very small place. I think I think if you're going to have anything done, you need to do your research well, whether it be in this country or abroad. You need to do your research. We're fortunate in the UK; there are a lot of regulations. You are restricted in what you can do, so you are relatively safe if you have it done in this country. Going abroad, I can't. I don't know what their regulations are. Are they as stringent as the UK? Possibly not. Some of the work abroad is very good. There's no doubt about it. But there are also, problems that you see sometimes. And the big difference between us and them is in the unlikely event that there is any, glitches or complications, we're here on hand to be able to deal with it. If you have something done abroad, it becomes difficult to then go back to them if you have a problem. So that's my view. But I think wherever you have it done, do your research, do your homework, know what you're getting yourself into beforehand.
We obviously know that there is some people could be quite expensive and some services could be ridiculously cheap. So what would be your guide here? Do you think that the cheap hair transplant service comes with some sort of compromises?
If anything sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. And I think anyone looking at hair transplants, they need to understand what it's all about. Hair transplant isn't something to take lightly. Done correctly for the right patient, it is absolutely life-changing. But, if you do the wrong procedure or if the patients aren't aware of what they're getting themselves into, it can lead to very disappointing results. A hair transplant, at the end of the day, we are shuffling hair around. We're not giving patients more hair than they've got. We're just taking it from one part of the head to the other and doing it in a way where they don't notice that loss. They only see the gain. But it is an illusion at the end of the day. And the difference between a good hair transplant and a bad hair transplant is how well that illusion has been created and been done. So anyone promising the world is probably not going to deliver it. So do research, speak to the surgeon that's actually going to do it, to understand what can be achieved and what can't be achieved.
I personally always, when it's come to personal care or health, I think you can't put a price on that really. I think there is many other things in life where you can save money on, and health is not one of those.
Absolutely. Money comes and goes. Health doesn't.
Absolutely. Many people, when they move to private sector, they think that they will work less and gain more. But sometimes it also could be illusion, because in anything that it's you are building, I think you need to put the right number of hours. How was it for you in the hair transplant industry? How many hours you have been working at the beginning when you just started as a hair transplant surgeon?
So, hair transplants take on average 6 to 8 hours per procedure. So you're already putting a lot of hours in whatever you do. I spent quite a bit of time just seeing how it was done, seeing how hairlines were drawn, seeing how the angles were, getting the angle of the hair correct, getting the density right. So I spent quite a period doing that, and I certainly didn't rush straight into it. As my advantage was the fine hand movement from my background made it easy, but still the subtleties of hair direction, density, that took quite some time. I was doing sometimes 6 or 7 days a week in the early stages just to get that bit of experience in before I started doing it on my own. And when I first started off, I had someone looking over my shoulder, making sure that yes, everything was right. I wasn't making any mistakes. I didn't just step into it and do it on my own. And I'm very grateful for those people that helped me start off. Private practice is part of it is a business. You do need to put the effort, you do need to put the hours in. If you take a day off, that's a day you don't get paid. So you do lose that safety net of a guaranteed check at the end of the day. There's no sick pay, there's no holiday pay. So you do have to work hard, but you do get that reward at the end. You have more control of what you do. You can pick and choose. So it starts off hard, but you learn to control it, you learn to manage it, and the end result is very rewarding.
Well, fantastic. I think that is very inspiring piece of advice for those who are probably just thinking about starting.
Yes.
And if there is any mistake or maybe something that you feel that you wished earlier, or you wished you learned earlier in your career?
Hair transplant is all about expectation, and it's all about listening to what the patients want and seeing what their expectations are. We can do some amazing stuff with hair transplants, but if it's not in keeping with the patient's expectations, they will be bitterly disappointed. So I think just taking that time to understand the patients, seeing where they're coming from, understanding what they want is very important. But by the same token, explaining to them what they can get, what can be achieved, and making sure that they understand that, they're taking that on board and they're happy with it. And taking that time, I can't stress enough how important it is.
And that is something I presume you learn with experience.
Yes, with experience, you start to understand more about what can be achieved. You start to pick up on cues with patients, what they're expecting, what they're wanting. So certainly experience plays a big role in that.
And the last question is, which I ask every single guest. Would you agree, Ahmad, that in your expert opinion, correctly perform hair transplant surgery has impact much farther than just reflection that person see in the mirror?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is, it affects how they do everything in life. I've had patients tell me they've gone into job interviews with so much more confidence that they've secured a job they never thought they would get. They are more confident talking with friends. It just changes their whole life. It's the mental health aspect of it, the confidence that comes with it is absolutely huge. They are so much more happier, so much more relaxed in themselves. You can, when they come for follow-ups, you can see it in the way they walk down the corridor compared to how they did first time round. The shyness, the insecurity goes.
Incredible. And finally, where the patient can find more information about you.
So when they're doing their research, GMC is always a good place to start. It gives them an idea about it. If so I'm registered with the Royal College of Surgeons, they can see on there the qualifications. And the internet has all sorts of information people can find.
Okay, so you can find more information about Dr. Ahmad Musa on the internet and GMC website. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.